When you look back at some of the early games on the Atari 2600 and also in the arcades, there are a few games that come to mind. Whether it's Space Invaders, Defender, Galaxian, or any other one that you might think, Asteroids seems to be a bit different. You weren't trying to save the Earth, you weren't fighting aliens, you weren't saving people. You were just kind of making bigger rocks into smaller rocks until eventually they went away. Which kind of makes it feel like a prison game, but whatever. Given the game's success in the arcades, it was really a no-brainer for Atari to make this into a home console port. They also ported the game into a lot of their 8-bit computers, which made a lot of sense for them at the time. The arcade game was released in 1979, and 2 years later Atari ported the game over to the 2600 and its line of 8-bit computers. One of the things that Atari had to do in order to really make this game work on both the home console and on their computers was change around the control schemes, since, like a lot of other arcade games, Asteroids had a fairly unique style in which they laid out their controls. For the home console, which is the one we're going to be looking at today, Atari had to somehow make this work with just a joystick and one button. So the button fires, which would make a whole lot of sense. Turning it right and left would rotate your ship in either direction. Pulling back on the joystick would send you into warp space or hyperdrive, and pushing up on it would engage your thrusters to send your ship forward. It was pretty simple, but it seemed to work. With the control scheme worked out, they had to kind of figure out what they were going to do with the graphics, because the 2600 at the time could not handle the same vector graphics that the arcade version used. So instead we get these chunky pixels, which work out pretty well, especially since they give you that satisfaction of the changing of colors, making the asteroids a little bit smaller, and it all just seems to work out fairly nice. Like a lot of other games from the early 80s, there's really no end goal for Asteroids. It's just keep fighting until you stay alive and, you get the high score. That's pretty much all you have to do. It's pretty easy to screw up in this game, and that hyperdrive that we talked about earlier, that is definitely one of the things that's going to screw you up. I honestly think it's a scam, to be perfectly honest. It'll warp you all around the screen, and in this case, you'll just kind of disappear and reappear in a place that you probably don't want to be. It can be really annoying, but every once in a while it'll get you out of a jam. While there isn't too much more to say about Asteroids from what I've laid out already, I will say it's a pretty fun game that did manage to, at least hold people's attention for a long period of time, which is really all you can actually hope for with an arcade game. Now you might be asking yourself, were there any sequels to this game, or how could they actually make sequels to it? Given the fact that there is absolutely no story, it's kind of surprising that there were 3 sequels to Asteroids, in Asteroids Deluxe, Space Duel, and Blasteroids. I don't know why, because they didn't really have anything to build on, but they did improve some of the concepts and add a few things to the game. What they did do is add a few pretty simple things like power-ups, replace hyperspace with shields, add bosses, and add a 2-player mode. So nothing too crazy, but it was enough to at least justify a few sequels. Despite its sequels, Asteroids just didn't really establish itself as a real legitimate series. This happened with a lot of Atari games that we've mentioned before, and most likely a lot more that we'll mention again. I can't help but wonder, how different this actually would have been if they had created some sort of a reason for why the spaceship is out there blowing up asteroids, or maybe added a main character or something to it to really keep the game going. It would have really changed things around, and they probably could have built on this a lot more. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. Hope you all have a great day. Talk to y'all later.